Prendo il microfono.
Parla a vedere per...
Hello?
Sounds good. Hello. Hi, everybody. It's a special pleasure to welcome all of you who are here sitting in this room and all of you who are joining us online. I'm Deborah Solomon. I'm an art critic here at WNYC, where I review shows on the radio. I am also a biographer of artists. I am currently writing a biography of Jasper Johns. I am here tonight to talk about Giuseppe Penone, one of the greatest sculptors around today, and who fortunately is visiting us tonight from his home in Turin. This evening's panel discussion celebrates the publication of a new monograph about him, The Inner Life of Forms. It is very large, and except for its beautiful cover, you could easily mistake it for the Manhattan phone book. But this is not a book that is a doorstopper. It is meant to be read and savored. It is written throughout with great clarity and literary flair. It is a book, I have to say, that has many of the same virtues we find in Penone's work, which is to say, the book is contemplative, it is meditative, it is heavy, and it is made of trees. To discuss the book with me, I am fortunate to have right here the artist and Carlos Basualdo.
Perfect. We've been rehearsing, you know.
Basualdo. I got it.
Yes,
Okay,
you
good.
got it.
Carlos speaks many languages and is a man of the world, as is true of Giuseppe as well. I don't read Italian or speak Italian, and that's one reason this book is so wonderful. It really provides much needed information for those of us who do not speak Italian and are not familiar with the many other books about you. To give you a little background about Giuseppe Penone, his art has been the subject of many museum exhibitions worldwide, including shows at the Yorkshire Sculpture Park in England this year, and at the Versailles Palace, and at the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. Born in 1947 in Gagosian, Italy, he first came to fame as a member of the Art Povera movement in Italy, which, as most of you know, rejected the bright, polished, corporate look of minimalist sculpture for an art that felt more authentic and direct. Penone uses the traditions of sculpture not to construct monuments to himself, but rather to locate and dramatize the inherent sculptural form that already exists in this world, especially in trees and in the human body. We are fortunate to have with us Carlos Basualdo, who edited the book. Carlos is an Argentinian-born curator who studied literature at the University of Rosario. He is currently the Keith and Catherine Sachs Curator of Contemporary Art at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. There he has curated many important shows that continue to exert a large influence on the art world, including Dancing Around the Bride, Cage, Cunningham, Johns, Rauschenberg, and Duchamp. He also organized the important show of Bruce Naumann's work that was shown in Venice in 2009 and won a Golden Lion Award for Best Pavilion. Carlos is known among his colleagues to be a brilliant curator with a pronounced philosophical bent, although when I asked him about that earlier this evening, he told me that he's just an amateur philosopher.
Very amateur.
So I want to start tonight's discussion by asking Giuseppe a question that I hope is not too provincial and American-centric. I'm wondering how he feels about earth artists in the United States, how he feels about Robert Smith's and Spiral Jetty, Walter de Maria's Lightning Field, and if you feel any connection at all with American earth artists, or not.
Art is always connected, because also if there is no, at that time there was less information than now, but good things usually are known immediately. So when I started to work, it was first work that was interesting was 68. I was 21, but I know that I saw the work of the Maria, of Iser, of Smithson. They work with a gallery. First time that I came to New York was in 70 for this show of information, curated by Ernesto McShine. At that time, I visited the Dwan Gallery. That was the gallery that was specifically work with the artists that make land art. So I had a kind of information. The difference with my work, it was that my work also, if it was done outside in the nature, was related with the size of my body. So I think this was the big difference with the work that that artists do.
And just to put a little bit of the conversation in context, what Giuseppe is talking is about this first series of works that are called Maritime Alps, the Alpi Marittime, that were done in Garesio, which is up in the mountains in a zone of Italy, in an area of Italy which is the north. It's called Piemonte, which is at the foot of the mountains, really. And Garesio is a place where Giuseppe was born, so it's an area that Giuseppe knew very well, intimately. And when one looks at the nature, that's also, I think, an interesting thing that you said very early on in our conversations, and one should keep in mind, is not this idea that it's the nature opposed to or separated from human work and labor. It's a nature that through millennia have been completely shaped by human labor. So it really is it's not a wild nature, but it's a nature that already has the marks of the human. So that, I believe, is also a very important difference with the earth artists. You know, in some of them there's this idealization of the realm outside of the human.
Right, and the Wild West, and infinite space.
Exactly. So it's a sort of a form, the form that colonialism, I would say the form that colonialism takes in art in the 60s to some degree. While I believe that in Giuseppe's work there is this profound respect for the signs that call memory mostly, and the memory of a human presence.
Yes, it's true, because all Europe, nature is not wild. It's all is shaped by the work of thousand years of the man. So the relation with the nature is not the same that you can have in the United States, where you have a very big area that is completely wild.
Also, it seems more populated in Europe. I mean, I'm thinking of English earth artists who are kind of working with a garden in a backyard, as opposed to American earth artists who want to take over craters and all that. I mean, the Italian landscape also is limited in size. You don't have sweeping deserts,
sure.
I don't think.
Yes,
and
but this is true. About that, if you think, for example, in the Japanese garden, you see this microcosmo, and the monk live all the life in a little space and is related with the universe. So the problem of the dimension is important, but you can find the infinity also in very little space.
Beautifully put. Tell us about your childhood. You grew up in a rural area of Italy and felt, it seems like, fairly connected to the land through what your father did for a living.
Yeah, I born in a little village, and the culture that I know better was this kind of culture. Was a culture related to the nature, related to the process of cultivation, of And you know, cultura e coltivazione is the two words that is very similar, culture and cultivated. And also I believe that these give an idea of time, because when you think cultivate some potatoes, for example, you have to put the potatoes in the soil, and after you have to wait, and you have to work. You do a lot of work, but without see the object of the potato that we will found. And this is something that happens also in the process of sculpture. You start with an idea, you start with a drawing perhaps, and after there is a lot of action that you do that are not immediately related to the final image of the work. And I think this is also a part of my way to work.
To cultivate.
Yes, I have done also a work with potatoes where I put the negative of
Do we have a shot of a mound of potatoes?
I don't think we have the book.
No,
Okay.
I can tell, it's easy. I put in the soil the negative of a face, different part, close it to a potato that was growing. And after I cover with the earth, and after when was ready the potatoes, I take and I found not so many, but because it was about 100 liter shape of mold, but I found 5 potatoes that have anthropomorphic form, nose. So it was an idea of work done where you cannot see nothing. It happened without your intervention.
Potatoes, you find anthropomorphic.
It's like
Trees, definitely. I mean, trees, I think, have always been a popular subject in art, not in sculpture, but in painting, for instance, because artists.
No,
Why are trees such a popular subject? I should ask you. What is?
Perché sono gli alberi così importanti per l'arte, un soggetto così importante?
No, this was, I started to do the first work that I have done was about the growing of tree. So it was an idea of sculpture
Right.
where...
We should, let's look at that sculpture. It's the image with the hand
for
on it.
example.
Are you controlling the images,
Yes.
Carlos? Okay.
It was about the gesture of the sculptor was not on a material that he shaped, but was the material himself that give the shape to the sculpture. So this was the first work that I have done, and I always have been fascinated by a tree because it is a being that he grow with each part, and he memorize his form inside of his body, but nothing of his form, of his shape is all is necessary. Nothing is gratuito. All is necessary, and so. It's fantastic to think you can do a sculpture with the same intensity, with the same necessity. And following this first work, I have done work where I found inside of a beam the form of a tree, following a ring of the growing of the
Right,
tree.
You cut away the tree until you got to the sapling inside, right?
Yeah, I
That's-
follow a ring.
No, it starts
Sorry.
from a wooden beam. So you have this industrial material that, a wooden beam that is used for construction. But then by carving inside the wooden beam, you find the tree.
Isn't that amazing?
He found the tree.
I know. So inside every wooden beam.
No, not every wood, but especially conifere.
Conifer trees.
Yes, other
You
trees is difficult to do that.
So can we have an image? Can we have an
So
image?
it was an
Yes,
idea of
of-
sculpture because you can. Is the old idea of sculpture that you can see all the work of art is already inside of the material.
Right.
So this was the reference, cultural reference, if you want. But it was a...
I think it's really interesting when Giuseppe talks to underline how much he thinks about sculpture from the beginning. But when you look at the processes and the images that the processes produce, you wouldn't think that these are like your traditional sculptures. But it's almost as he would take the elements of what sculpture means and put them in action by themselves, right? In this relationship between nature and the human presence, in which the human presence recognizes itself in nature, becomes in a way denaturalized by that recognition.
Right. You're interested in finding the sculptural presence that's already there, but hidden.
Ti interessa incontrare la forma scultorica che c'è lì ma è nascosta.
Yeah, this is a part of the work that I have done. Is to consider the material and to have a relation with the material. But you can, for me, it's not possible to do any kind of form with any kind of material. Each material have a possibility of expression, and you have to follow the material to make the best work. If you force the material, you don't have a good result, because you are against. It never work to be against something.
Right. You said that you admire trees because every part of them is absolutely necessary, and there's nothing gratuitous about a tree. But I'm wondering, you could cut out a piece of a tree, and it won't kill it. I'm just wondering about your love of trees, and what is it that draws you to trees?
Okay.
Che cosa ti ha attratto degli alberi?
No, this was the first work was because it was the possibility to use the tree like a material that he make the sculpture by himself, because the imprint of the hand inside of the tree is similar to the imprint of a hand in the clay. So it was just a different approach where the action.
We should, this image right here is the key one, right?
With the action of the man was the form of the sculpture was done by the material, not by the gesture of the sculptor. So it was a symbolic idea of esempio. It was an example of.
Right, and can you tell viewers what we're looking at here exactly? Because it looks as if you're pressing your hand into an actual tree. What's happening here?
In questa è la sostituzione del.
Yeah, this the idea was that you cannot stay a long time to force the growing of the tree. So I have made arm in steel or bronze, and I put on the tree so that you can see. This was the first work.
I mean, time is always very important in the work from the beginning. No?
Yes.
Because here you're basically, the action, you're basically giving it a different time length, right? By making a cast hand instead of a real hand.
Yeah, it was the idea that the process of the sculpture was the time. The sculpture in itself was the time, and this time you can find inside of the tree, because of the ring of the.
Right.
When you carve the beam, then you're basically going back in the history of the tree, right?
Yeah,
so you're finding a tree that existed years ago.
Right. Oh, it's
so
fascinating.
Time becomes a very, time, which is always a part of everything that we do, which is a very, the very medium of life. It becomes very clearly a component of the work.
Right, the process of making the work.
Yes.
I'm wondering what you think of John Cage, if he interests you at all, or has been an influence on. He's somebody, of course, who tended to find a lot of artistic interest in moments that other people had ignored, such as silence. Does
John Cage, I don't know very well because I don't know music very well, but I know that that he's big expert of mushroom.
Are there, okay, which do you feel that any artists have influenced you in what you do? We were saying earlier that in some ways you seem like a one-man movement because you started with Art Povera, but you're very different from the other artists, what I think of as other Art Povera work, because you moved away from the urban to the pastoral. And the pastoral has not been a big theme in contemporary art. In that sense, you're really out there by your own. And
when you do a work like that, you are interested in art in general. So you are interested in ancient work, in contemporary. So it's not just one something that happened following another something that happened before. Mm-hmm. It is perhaps what we can tell that in that year, in the 60s, was after war. After war, countries like Italy, but in general Europe, had a big influence by United States with another approach to the art, another view also of the possibility of expression. And in a way, the work that I have done, but not just me, it was a kind of to try to don't lose the identity, and to be conscient of the possibility and also of the interest of the American artist of this moment, but to try also to found your origin, your so for a problem of identity. If no, I born in a village. I don't born in a big town like New York. So it was, but I think that a stone is the same in a big town or in a village.
Oh, that's nice. A stone is the same.
Yeah.
Anywhere, is that true?
Perhaps in the town it's difficult to find a natural stone, but you have natural stone in the Central Park. So elements, and what I want to tell is that the idea of the center is relativo.
It's relative.
Mm-hmm.
It's relative.
The center of
the world,
of course. Yeah. Well, it sounds like from your description that you found your bearings as an artist with relative ease, that you felt so committed to the landscape from the beginning that it was almost inevitable that you ended up working this way. Was it all that smooth, your development as an artist?
Io che sembra che tu hai trovato dall'inizio che sapevi molto chiaramente dove lavorare. È stato facile, è stato così spontaneo?
It was I had intuition, and I start with this work, and after in a short time I have produced a lot of ideas. And after I started to organize this idea, in first moment I just produce idea, and the second moment I try to understand what I have done before.
I think that one thing that is a biographical, information, but it's relevant in this context is Giuseppe's grandfather was, a sculptor. And so those works, that was present in the family, and his brother also made sculpture early on, and we have to think that these works, the first works, Alpi Marittime, were done where Giuseppe was basically in art school in Turin, but he would go out, during the weekends, or when he didn't have classes, to Garesio, and then he would be engaged in the land, a land that he knew very well because his father would, would buy and sell agricultural products, and Giuseppe would go with his father. So he knew that was his studio, really. But I believe that for a 21-year-old to know so clearly, to understand, because Giuseppe is saying, yes, in 1970 I came and I went to that one gallery. Yes, but that is 1970. And these works were done in 1968, right? So this is before he comes to New York and visits one gallery.
Right.
So there is, it's before he starts showing with Arte Povera. I mean, it would be, Germano would see his work shown in the gallery of Gianenzo Sperone and would invite him, Germano Celand,
right, who
was
first
the founder of Arte Povera, and will invite him to be part of the book, the Arte Povera book that was, that included also international artists. But the very intuition that sculpture, he wouldn't do sculpture in the traditional sense, and there's some beautiful sculptures that he did when he was a child. That some of them are in the school, and they're like perfect resemblances, right? I mean, you can see some of them in the book. We felt it was fun to show that, but I mean, there is this familiarity with materials from the beginning. There is this really, this great relationship with the very notion of sculpture, but this very determined, and very early decision that, he was not going to work with that language as it existed. That he was going to, decompose it and recompose it in his own terms, and I think that's remarkable for a 21-year-old.
Well, and when you say you had a vision of what you wanted to do, I think that in itself also is somewhat unusual. It sounds like you had a lot of clarity as a young artist.
I believe too that my art for me was like a dream of something very important, and I have done a school of accountant. This is very important in my formation. Because when it was something that I don't like, but I have done the school, and after I finish the school, I go to the art school. And when I see what they teach and what was possible to do, I understand that I have nothing to do with this. So I try to find my own path.
In a way that I would think that's the hardest part of being an artist, when those early years when you're trying to find your bearings and find a language that you think is yours alone. Not everybody finds it.
Yes, this is the other, because I remember at this moment in the school, other people repeat the sculpture of other person or painting. Or
what was popular at the time? Was this during the age of minimalism?
It can be Moore, it can be Giacometti in sculpture, it can be Matisse or all the... But my thinking it was, if you art is an image. Image is not like when you wrote something. When you wrote, you can change the position of the word and you have different meaning. But in art, when you if you have a canvas and you put an image in a point of the canvas, and after you move this in another position, this image don't change a little the composition.
That's fascinating.
But it don't change. So this explains also the strong presence of the symbol. A symbol, if it's red, yellow, white, or black, is always the same. It don't lose its meaning. Art is that also. When you see a work that is done by an artist and is remade in another way by another artist, I think that probably is just a diffusion of the work of the artist that they've done first. It's not... I think that. I don't know if it's wrong or...
You're right, talking about the academic traditions that held no meaning for you. Carlos, you want to say something? I hope I don't forget my question.
No, one thing to note is that Turing at this time was a very interesting place in the sense that, this is the Turing of Fiat. Fiat was, very powerful at the time. Agnelli was a collector. There were very important galleries. Michel Tapies was there showing Informalism. How much did you see of it? Did you see Gutai shows? I mean,
yeah, they have done an interesting show at the time in the little museum of the town. And they've done Gutai, they've done Yves Klein, and have done several very good shows. I remember, yeah, there was an activity. There was also very good gallery. There's Tazzoli, it show.
no?
See, there you can see Schiele, you can see Klimt, you can see Sutherland. So it was in a way. Also, it was very little, but you can find interesting information in the town. And my first work started with Sperone, that was related with Ileana Sonaben. And because Ileana had a gallery in Paris, and she started to work with some Italian artists. And it was this, Ileana, it was very important for development of the situation in Torino, I believe. It is difficult to imagine, but it's like that.
Well, she gave everybody sort of an international forum. She brought you to Paris. Was that it? At her Paris gallery, and Italian artists were able to gain very wide exposure?
No, because Ileana had this gallery in Paris, and she showed also Italian artists, young Italian artists. She deal with American artists, but also she deal with the French artists or Italian artists. So it was a relation. It was a real communication with the art. It was just not just a product that was imposed, but was a kind of dialogue. And Sperone started the gallery with the help of Ileana Sonaben. In the beginning was Ileana that he helped him.
But there is this background of humanism. I think that's a very important element for all the arte povera artists. There is a profound relationship with humanism, and I think you can look at the informalism being shown at that time and understand that probably came from there. So I think that on the one hand they had that connection to informalism in Europe, and on the other hand they had this distant relationship which was very antagonic with pop, right? So I think that those are important coordinates.
To return for a second to the question of trying to be original. When I talk to artists, so many say when they were young they wanted to do something that was different than what was being done. And I always wonder, is that the goal? Are they being more honest than other artists who just say, oh, I was trying to express myself or make a beautiful object? Is the goal to make something different from what's been made before? If you were teaching young artists, would you tell them that it's important to break from tradition and come up with something new? I mean, it's important if you want to be a major artist, of course, but is it important for everybody?
But if you break with tradition, you have a space of image that is not known. So this is important because you can wield your image, but also is more exciting than repeat an image that is already known. So it's part of the pleasure of the invention of the dream.
Not everybody can do it, and it seems like you really had a very distinct vision, some sense of what you wanted from the beginning, and have always been pretty original. Have you found your art career very difficult? You make it sound like it all went pretty well.
No.
What have been the difficult moments of your career?
A difficult moment? I never had difficult moments.
No difficult moments. It's a breeze.
No, because my difficult moment, it was when I have no idea. Because I try to have a economic situation, very simple economic situation that give me possibility for life. But after the problem was to to do the work, and this was what was more important, because you can do a great work with a piece of paper and a charcoal, something that is dust, no? You can do wonderful things. I am always astonished when you think in a drawing is nothing. It's a piece of paper, and after you have, and it's more precious than the diamond, the gold. So it is incredible. It's
Yeah,
just
why
the
is that? Why is that?
organization of the dust.
Why is art so beloved? Why?
Dello sport.
He says always that a drawing is paper and dirt, no?
Right, right. So why are people so excited by drawings? How do you explain the passion for art?
Come tu spieghi la passione per l'arte?
Ma no, is a possibility of imagination, of invention, and is something that you escape from a reality, or you can go deeply in the reality, not just escape. You can find something that is not evident in the first look. So this is something that I think is interesting, but it's the same interest perhaps that have people that do a research on physics or in another context, with the same motivation, I believe.
Right. I'm wondering if you saw the Bruce Nauman show at MoMA.
Now?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no, I don't.
Okay. Well, he came of age around the same time you did, and also kind of went up against minimalism, as you well know, and started making objects that at first sort of looked nothing like art. And I think it's interesting that there were independent movements in America and Europe, and it doesn't seem like there was a lot of crossover between you and the Americans.
Yeah, that's
You
true.
came here in 1970. What was that like? Was it interesting for you to be here?
Oh, sure. It was very interesting because it was a word that I don't know. But in the same month, I was in New York, and after I was in Tokyo. So I see also this other reality that was incredible. You know, it was very. But it was a moment also. We can. We think that world was like one country, shared by different people. So also another aspect of the work of this year was to simplify the work in order to make a work that was easy to be understood in different culture, not just in one specific culture. This, I think, is a way that is possible to understand the approach, the minimal approach to the form, or also the conceptual approach to the form. But a lot of artists have done work with very simple material that was related to culture that is you think Richard Long with his. It can be in South Africa, it can be in South America, in Japan, in Russia. It's something that you can share in different contexts of. Not just in a specific. So there was also this idea: don't do a work that was just of colonization, of imposition, to the work that was a kind of dialogue.
Well, there's nothing more universal than a tree, right?
Yes.
Or a rock.
No, some. If you go in Arabia, they don't have.
But I know you've said, because I read the new book, that you don't read any ecological or environmental meanings in your work. You don't want it to be kind of appropriated by environmentalists.
No, but
And
this was because my approach was about the idea of sculpture. So, I don't want to appear something that was not. Also, there is something in the ecologic approach that is, in a way, the interest of man to preserve nature for his own interest, not for the interest of the nature. So it's something that sometimes is instrumental.
Instrumentalized.
right.
So
But right now, I think most of us feel that preservation of the land is probably
no,
a good thing.
This is very important. It's very important. But I believe that is easier to do with. If you want to work about that, you have to do politics. You have to do another kind of work, not art.
Right.
It's like the work that is based on the sufferance of the people. You have you have always the doubt that the word artwork is sold, but it's sold about, on the sufferance of the other people. So this is something that is ambiguous in a way.
Tell us what's up here on the screen.
This work, this is two stone, one stone that I collect in the river, and after I go back on the river in the mountain where was the quarry of the same kind of stone, and I repeat the form of the stone that I take in the river. So this is something to do with the idea of mimesis, of the to do something equal to the other.
So you make the other stone from scratch. What do you make it from? Is it
So he finds a stone in the river, and then he goes up the river and he finds the quarry from which that stone initially came. So he takes a block from the quarry and turns that into a stone that is the replica of the stone that he found.
by carving?
By carving, yes. But when you do a work with stone, you do something that is very similar to what happened a stone in a river, because there is shock, you have sand that abrasion, you have a lot of action that is very similar of what happened in the river. And the title of the work was is to be a river, because it's the action, is a mimesis also of the action, not just of the form.
And the mimesis is the first impulse to create something, right? I mean, to put something out there that resembles something, so you can say art starts, from the mimetic impulse. But in this case, the mimesis is to replicate a sculpture that was done by nature, that was done by no one. So by being, you put yourself something out there, but you put in the work of no one, right? I think it's a very beautiful work.
Can we have some more images? Here, this also is to be a river. Oh, look at that way. Go back. What was that? Tell us.
This is the same idea, because I had the idea to do the same with a grain of sand. But I had not, at the time when I do the first work was in 80, and I had not the possibility to do that. A few years ago, I met people, a physician in Grenoble, that is an institution of nanotechnology, and speaking with them, they helped me to do the work. So we take a grain of sand, and after we take another grain of sand, bigger, and we do the sculptures. So the idea was to do something that was still visible by the eye, because with the nanotechnology you can do something that is not visible. But in that case, the grain is about 1-2 millimeter, so it's visible.
We need to look at the contact lens piece. Do we have images of that?
This was before. This is This was a work that I have done always in 70. It was also related to the sculpture. The view is when you have it's the extension of your body in the space. So the definition of the body is not clear because it's until you are you can see as the dimension of your body. So I think that you have an identity of the body, so an idea of the sculpture of the body if you have the island close. And I think to do, if I just do a photo with the eye closed, it was, don't make nothing. So I try to think what it can give this idea. And finally, I decide to do these contact lenses that is mirrored because they stop the view and they project the things that I have to see in the space, so other people can see what
Right, they were mirrored, so you couldn't see out.
Yes.
And when people looked at you, they saw their own reflection. So you
Yeah.
basically...
They saw what he could have been seeing. He could have seen if he wouldn't have them.
Right.
But it also, they were a performance. So he wore them and walked with them, and then pictures or photographs were taken, and those photographs were, turned into a work. One is a slide projection, but you see all the performatic aspect of the work from very early on.
I know,
right?
you blinded yourself in a way, because you
Yes.
couldn't see when you were wearing those lenses, right?
There
What
was
did
a
you
very
see?
little point where I can see something,
Light.
but the idea was to blend.
Right. So what was that like, walking around without your vision?
I don't walk too much. I stay in a corner.
They're very striking photographs. Do you? I mean, you look like
Because he was so good looking.
you look like
He's
you
still
were
good looking.
like you were painted by Caravaggio. Did you? Do you consider the photographs part of your artistic output? Are they just documentation, or do you consider
But
them?
in part was documentation also in that case, but in that case became also the work because in reality when I have done that, I realized that it became a performance if I stay with the contact lenses in the space, and it's not what that I want. I want to have another idea. So I think that the photo can be the work in himself. So I asked a friend to do the photo of me with the contact lenses.
I think that's one of the best known images of your work in this country. Should we open this up to questions?
I wanted to point out to one work
Go,
also.
please.
That is one of my favorites. Just because, the trees are associated with Giuseppe very justly because he has worked with trees. But the truth is that the more you learn about the work, the more you see that there is this constant process of reflection that is about materials and ways of making. And trees are a natural place to emerge, from time to time. But the truth is that the work is so much more about so many other things than trees. And I think this is one of my very favorites. It's called Breath. Maybe, Giuseppe, you can tell us about this work in Sofia.
Breath, the idea was to do, I think that when you breathe, you introduce in the space a form of air that is different from the air that is outside. And this is a form of sculpture. As a sculpture is an automatic sculpture that it follows us for all the life. So it was, my idea was to make visible this. So I start, it was in 78, this work. I start to think how to do, and finally I decided this form of clay, like a big pot, it was probably the best form to make this intention. So there was the imprint of the body inside of a jar, una giara, no? Si dice giara, no? A big pot, and it was this presence and this absence. It was a kind of synthesis of these elements. And another work that I have done, it was, we say, is this, where I was in the leaves. I breathe in the leaf, and after I go up, and you have the weight of the body and the weight of the breath.
You left impressions in the leaves. It's beautiful. Where was that piece performed? Where was that performed?
Oof, I have done several times.
You need to have a major museum show in the United States. I mean, we want to see all these in person instead of
perhaps,
looking at slides. Is that in the works at all? Can we help at all?
What is important is to have the work after the show is followed. Yes.
Do we have any questions out there? Yes. Hi.
Many questions, but could you tell us a little bit?
Oh, I'm sorry, there's a mic. Do you want to come up to the mic? Use the mic and say your name first, if you don't mind.
I'm Allison Bradley.
Hi, Allison.
I'm a bit speaking also for two other colleagues that are with me. Senor Penone, could you tell us a little bit about your time in Tokyo and how you felt being a part of the historic show in 1970 and meeting other artists, both from Japan and internationally, who were involved?
From Tokyo.
Sì, come ti sei sentito Tokyo? Che è stato?
But in 70, Tokyo, it was not like now. It was a town that no, Japanese don't speak English. There was really another world. And I was lucky because the show that was there, the title of the show was Between Man and Matter, was an international show organized by the Mainichi newspaper. And there was an American artist, a European artist, a Japanese artist invited for that show. And what it was extraordinary, it was in a park. The museum was, the space was the Museum of the City. It was in Ueno Park, that is a part of Tokyo where there is a lot of temple. And that. So each morning when I go to the museum, I walk through the garden. It was very, very, very nice, very interesting. And it helped me a lot to approach to Japan. At that time, I had already done the work carving, founding the tree inside of the wood. This kind of work was already done. But what was interesting for me, it was something that I recognized in the culture of Japan, like part of my culture. And finally, I think to have understood that what was that, because when I was a child, I was in mountain, and sometimes you had a little house, and the source, the herbs, the stone, all was very, very well preserved. And people that was living there have a kind of love for this little microcosmo. And it's something that you have also in the Japanese temple, where so there was, these people spend all the life perhaps in very little space, in the mountain. They don't move, they don't travel, they stay there. And the universe of them was very little, but it was shared with universe of Japan in a way, because the garden of in the temple, the monk spent the time of their life in a little space too. So it was something that helped me to think about the possibility of expression also.
That's Emily Dickinson, the universe in a grain of sand. Is that Emily? Yeah.
Yes, come on up.
Hi, it's Fong Bui from the Brooklyn Rail.
Oh, hi.
Hi, how are you? So one question for Giuseppe and one question for you, Carlos. He mentioned a great deal about material, and you mentioned humanism, which somehow brought to mind the tail end of the 18th century, the triumph of Enlightenment. So by the very beginning of the 19th century, with the rise of industrialism, there were people who were seeking for Neoplatonism or some form of returning to nature. And materialism and humanism couldn't coexist without alchemy. So Blake, Novalis, maybe go further back to Giordano Bruno. So I'm wondering whether there's something in your interest that may have some deeper roots in Hermeticism. Hermeticism is the key.
Nel romanticismo?
No, nell'ermeticismo.
Ermeticismo.
E l'alchimia.
Sì. No, this is true that at this moment there was a big interest in alchemy and in Hermeticism, but it's something that was present in all Europe, and not just probably in Europe. You mentioned Novalis, but we can mention also Giacomo Leopardi or other writer. I think this is a part of a specific culture that relate together people of Europe, and it's something that we forget in part, and it was very useful to forget because it's also an attitude that became that it was at the base of nation. And this idea of nation became something that the war that we had. So it's something that after war, this was completely forgotten or not, it was not forgotten, but it was not appreciated like before.
I think that Giuseppe is also thinking, there's in Italian thought, I mean, you have these two lines, of people who have really dealt so deeply with these questions. On the one hand, you can say Elemire Zola, right? But you also have Julius Evola, right? So it's complicated.
But also the beginning of Romanticism, it was there was cells pietiste. It was a point in, for example, in Germany, where was more erano preti, priests.
They were priests.
Yes, that was very cultivated, and yeah, the relation in the country, but not. So there was people that communicate in the space. Also Goethe had this with Brentano, with the had this relation with the pietisti. Purtroppo non sono esperto.
Anyone else out there have a question?
My name is Michael. I thank you for your amazing work that you do. I'm curious about process. When I see the photograph of you with this huge tree, and you are attempting to get into it and discover and show us the essence of that material. I'm just interested in the faith and obviously the expertise and the courage that you have that as you get into the center and the heart of that tree. I don't know exactly how to ask the question, but I'm interested in artists need faith and courage to keep pushing through what it is that they are trying to do. And you amongst many, but certainly when I see this photograph, you don't know exactly what's in that tree. But as an expert of carving many trees, obviously you have an idea. So I'm just sort of interested in
It's always a surprise. You can never know exactly.
So did you ever get down to I guess the sapling and say, I don't like where the branches are? And
Yes, this is the problem, because sometimes you have a tree that the branches have a very strange movement. But what is done is very pragmatic. I start by a big ring of the tree, and after I reduce, so I avoid the possibility to do many mistakes. So
the other important thing is that he doesn't fell the trees. That I think that's important. I mean, this is a tree that came. I mean,
this came from Versailles. It was the storm of end of the last century. That there's big storm in France, and there was a big trunk in Versailles that friends of Versailles have done an auction, and I hear about it. I buy this piece.
Okay, I just have to, before we end, tell you that I was reading the Andy Warhol catalog this week for the new show. And I don't know if you've ever thought about Warhol, if you care about him, but I came across a quote from him that I found a little shocking. He said, "Land really is the best art." And I thought, oh, I didn't know he was so into land. I think you've been very daring in embracing nature and the human body to the degree that you have in an age that was often dominated by a kind of urban-style abstraction. And I just really look forward to seeing more of your work. And thank you so much, in the meantime, for bringing us up to date on what you're working on and where you've been. So thank you, and thank you for being such a nice audience.
Grazie. Thank you.